Alright, so I've got to be a little bit honest here. This video was a lot harder to make than the Canon one that I just made. Sony actually doesn't have that many beginner level cameras. Sure, they've got beginner cameras, but not at a beginner price range. You know, Canon, you can pick up a great camera for $500 US. For Sony, there's nothing under $750 available with an interchangeable lens. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't recommend any beginner pick up any camera that doesn't have an interchangeable lens on it, because otherwise it's hard to progress. It's hard to move forward. So with that said, this list is going to be a little bit more expensive than usual, but if you want to be shooting Sony, you got to pay that price. I also want to clarify that I think Sony's autofocus is amazing across the board. So I'm not going to be saying for every single one of these cameras that this has great autofocus and this has great autofocus and this camera has great autofocus too. To be honest with you, they just all have great autofocus. And also, we're only covering brand new options here. I'm not covering any secondhand stuff, only cameras that Sony still makes and that you can buy online. So with that being said, let's dive into the best beginner cameras that Sony offers in 2023. We first have the Sony a6400. Now, this guy is the cheapest on the list, but it's still super feature packed. It's also the oldest by far on this list, so you do want to keep that in mind, but you are getting a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor, which is very solid. All of these cameras are going to be taking similar kind of photos, so just keep that in mind. You don't get a flip out screen. Instead, you get something really strange, and to be honest with you, I have no idea why Sony did this. Sony's had a bit of a strange history with screens, but they've got a flip up screen. So the screen actually comes up and over the camera. It doesn't come out the side. Pretty strange. You don't have any IBIS, so no in-body image stabilization whatsoever. So keep this in mind. If you're shooting video, or if you're shooting a lot of night photos or photos in dark situations, you're either going to want a lens with stabilization or you're going to want a lens with a low aperture. This is to make sure you can let in as much light as possible and you don't have to use a super slow shutter speed. And for video, you're either going to want super steady hands or you want to get pretty good at using a gimbal. Now, speaking of video, you can shoot in 4K 30 FPS, which is great, and 1080p up to 120 FPS. You do get one single card slot and somewhat of an average battery life on this camera, and to be honest with you, this is a very good deal. In my opinion, nothing really that Canon makes apart from the Canon R10 looks anything similar to this, and this is significantly cheaper than the Canon R10. So if you're in the market for one of the cheapest cameras but still a very solid camera from Sony, this one might be for you. And next up, in the same line as the a6400, we've got the brand new a6700. Now, this is rocking a 26 megapixel APS-C size sensor, so fairly similar to the a6400, but you can do 11 FPS raw still shooting, which is actually fairly quick. This is also in a fairly compact, small body, so to be able to do 11 FPS is fairly impressive. You can shoot up to 4K 120 FPS in 10-bit 422 recording, which is mind-blowing. And of course, you can shoot in S-Log as well, so you are getting a lot of flexibility when it comes to color grading. You've also got 1080p 240 FPS, but to be honest, in 2023, I don't know many people who are shooting in 1080p, which is amazing for both videographers and photographers. You get USB-C power input, which is really, really cool, which means you can power this camera for as long as you like. You can plug it into a wall or plug it into an external battery source, and you can power it for days. You then also get one SD card slot, and finally a normal tilty flippy screen, one that comes out the side, rotates like this and that is arguably the best screen you can get. But the a6700 is really interesting. This is pretty much like a 2023 spec of the a6400 because it's in the exact same product line. The best part about this though is it's updated to absolute high hell, which is perfect for both videographers and photographers. This is a true hybrid camera, especially in the sub $1,500 range from Sony. And then finally, arguably the most controversial camera that I'll recommend this entire video. I'm interested to see the comments on this one, the FX30. Now, you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, Zach, why on earth are you recommending a full-blown cinema camera to a beginner? Well, to be honest with you, for some people, this is in their price range. For some people, this is exactly what they're after. For some people, this ticks every single box, and that's amazing. Not every single beginner camera needs to be at rock bottom prices. Not every single beginner camera needs to be at rock bottom features. And this is definitely not rock bottom in any means necessary. And the best part is that it's cheaper than the Sony ZV-E1, and it's gonna last you a long time. Believe me, you buy this camera, it's at least got a solid 4 to 5 years lifespan with you because there is no way you're progressing past this anytime soon. Now, this is a video first camera, so photographers keep this in mind. It's not for you. If you want a brand new camera that's just come out, the a6700 is for you. If you want to spend less, the a6400 is for you. To be honest, the list kind of stops there. But let's dive in to the FX30. So you get a 26.1, a little bit better than the a6700, a 26.1 megapixel APS-C size sensor. You can shoot up to 4K 120 FPS, which is brilliant. You can shoot in 10-bit 422 recording with up to 16-bit RAW, which is just wild, via HDMI into like an external monitor, which is just insane, but you can't do that internally. You do need the external monitor and the external recording capability. You get dual card slots, which is amazing for anyone moving forward in a professional space. Believe me, having 2 card slots is the biggest peace of mind. You can either record your video to both of the cards, meaning you're getting a live backup, which is amazing, or you can have it so once one card is full, it just moves straight into the second card, so you don't have to swap any cards out at any time. So this is an absolute lifesaver. You also get dual base ISO, which is really nice. This is very, very handy when you're shooting in low light conditions. Believe me, having a dual base native ISO is just amazing. And if you don't know what a dual base native ISO is, let's say for example, I'll take my Canon R5C. This has a dual base native ISO, one set at 800 and one set at 3200. So as you progress up your ISO levels, of course, more noise gets introduced into your shot. But if you have a dual base ISO, what happens is at 800, you have 0 noise. And then all the way up to 3200, you're getting noisier and noisier and noisier until you hit 3200. And then it drops off again, no noise again, and you restart. This is such a hack. This is such a solid feature to have on any camera. And believe me, as a beginner that gets a taste of this, you're never gonna wanna go without it. You get the same 5-axis in-body image stabilization you get in the a6700. You get the tilty flippy screen, an incredibly robust body as well. Like, this thing is built so well. It's built exactly like the FX3, which is just on another level. And then of course, you get a very compact body considering what you get. Like, the price to size, if that's even a thing, or the performance to size, better said, the performance to size ratio is just through the roof. Now, I know this is a ridiculous camera for a beginner, but to be honest with you, if you don't want to be sat there thinking to yourself, man, I'm shooting all this stuff, but it could look better on a different camera, or the only reason my shots look bad is because of this camera, you're never going to have that thought with this body. And of course, the price on this is fairly high. To be honest, for anyone, it's quite an expensive camera, but for a beginner, it's definitely an expensive camera. But to be honest with you, there are some people out there that have the money and just want to be able to spend and get to a really good camera first and learn that camera. Now, that wasn't me. I had to start with the Canon 600D. So you know what? For a lot of people, that isn't reality. But for people out there, that is a reality. And maybe you're 1 year into this or 2 years into this and you're starting to see a future. The FX30 is an amazing body, and believe me, you will not regret going with it at all. So if you're starting out, you've got a little bit of cash to splash, and you're hell-bent on shooting with Sony, these are my top 3 recommendations for 2023.